Turin, Italy, January 3rd, 1889. A thin man with a thick mustache and eyes that have seen too much walks through Piazza Carlo Alberto. Then he sees a coachman brutally whipping a horse. The animal groans, its eyes reflecting a silent, ancient pain. Nietzsche runs. He hugs the horse's neck, he cries, and it collapses. That was the last lucid moment of the man who dared to see the world without masks. The philosopher who killed God now drooled and signed letters as the crucified one. The truth had devoured him completely. Grab your whiskey as we delve deeper into the subject. The truth leads us to madness, the path to the abyss. If you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. There's something in you that searches, that questions, that isn't satisfied with ready-made answers wrapped in gift paper by society. That's why you should subscribe to this channel, because you deserve a space where thought is still dangerous. Nietzsche once asked, "To what extent can truth withstand embodiment?" Translating, how much weight can you bear to carry that which truly matters? And without the comforting fantasies we all use to fall asleep at night, because that's what we're talking about here. Not some mental breakdown, not some illness that caught Nietzsche like a cold. We're talking about the price you pay when you dare to look at reality without blinking, without looking away, without putting rose-colored filters over the abyss. Now tell me, do you really want to know the truth, or do you prefer your warm and comfortable illusions? Because Nietzsche paid the price. And the price was his own sanity. Let's understand how this happens. Most people live on autopilot. They wake up, work, consume, sleep, repeat. They believe what they've been told to believe. They follow rules they've never questioned. They seek meaning where there is none. And that's fine for them. These people sleep well at night. Nietzsche didn't sleep. He was the kind of restless mind that can't simply to accept from a young age. When he was still an academic prodigy studying classical philology, he already demonstrated a disturbing ability to see through. While others saw respectable traditions, he saw mechanisms of control. Where others saw divine morality, he saw human fear disguised as virtue. And the more he saw, the more alone he became. Because the truth, my dear viewer, is radically antisocial. Think about it for a moment. Society functions based on collective agreements, on shared lies that everyone pretends to believe. Be good and you'll go to heaven. Work dignifies man. Everything happens for a reason. In the end, justice prevails. Beautiful, isn't it? Comforting. That's also completely false. And Nietzsche knew this. He exposed each of these pious lies in his books. He showed that Christian morality was merely resentment disguised as virtue, that good and evil were inventions of weak people to control the strong, that God had died not because someone killed him, but simply because he ceased to make sense in a world that was finally waking up. But here's the problem. When you remove all those illusions, what's left? The void, the abyss. The stark realization that there is no intrinsic meaning, no cosmic justice, no redemption awaiting at the end. There is only this, an indifferent universe, a life without guaranteed purpose, and the terrifying freedom of having to create your own meaning amidst the chaos. And that, my friend, breaks most people. Nietzsche spent decades carrying this weight, writing alone, misunderstood, publishing books that nobody read, sick, isolated, poor. His only companions were his own ideas so radical, so devastating, that even he himself could not fully bear their implications. Because one thing isto no thought, God is dead. Another thing isto levine, a world where God is dead, and Nietzsche lived intensely until he could no longer. There is a cruel scene in this story. In his last lucid years, before his final collapse, Nietzsche wrote faster and faster, more and more feverishly, as if he were trying to get everything out before it was too late. Behold the man, his last lucid book, is almost a farewell cry, arrogant, prophetic, desperate. He knew he was losing the battle against what he had discovered. And then came Turin, the horse, the embrace, and the silence. Nietzsche spent the last 11 years of his life as a shadow of his former self. He no longer thought, he no longer wrote, he simply existed. His mother and later his sister cared for him as one cares for a child. He who had been the philosophical hammer was now just a broken man, humming children's songs. The truth had swallowed him whole. Take a deep breath for a moment, because here is the central question, the one that will haunt us throughout this entire video. Was Nietzsche's madness a failure, a biological accident, or was it the inevitable consequence of having seen too much? Is there a limit to how much truth a human being can endure before they break down? And if that limit exists, where is it within you? You wake up, you have coffee, you go to work, you greet people, you smile when you should smile. You get indignant when you should get indignant. You believe you are making free choices, that your opinions are, that their values came from deep and personal reflection. Lie, almost everything you believe has been installed in you like software. By family, school, religion, culture, the algorithms that feed your brain daily. You are, to a large extent, a well-intentioned puppet dancing to music you didn't even choose to hear. And you know what's most disturbing? This is necessary. Because without these masks, without these collective illusions, society simply crumbles. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He wasn't naive enough to believe that the truth sets you free and that's it. Everyone's happy. No. He knew that truth is poisonous. That most people needs it's all about lies to function. Removing those lies overnight is like pulling the rug out from under someone's feet. In Beyond Good and Evil, he writes, the falsity of a judgment does not, for us, constitute an objection against it. The question is to what extent it promotes or preserves life. Translating from Nietzschean into plain Portuguese. It doesn't matter if something is true. What matters is if it keeps you alive and functioning. And this, my friends, is one of the most radical and disturbing ideas ever conceived. Let's do an exercise. Think about religion. Any religion, it doesn't matter. They all offer the same thing. A ready-made, meaning gift-wrapped with a bow and everything. You are here for a reason. There is a plan. God loves you. Your suffering has meaning. After death, there is reward. Beautiful, isn't it? Now, take that off. Get rid of the idea that there is a God watching over you. Get rid of the promise of heaven. Get rid of the divine morality that tells you what is right and wrong. Get rid of the comfort that everything happens for a reason. What's left? A frightened animal, alone in a cold and indifferent universe, without an instruction manual, without an end goal, without any guarantee that anything you do truly matters. This is what Nietzsche saw when he declared that God was dead, and he wasn't celebrating. He was terrified, because Nietzsche knew that the death of God was not merely the death of a religious belief. It was the collapse of an entire system of values, of an entire structure of meaning that had sustained Western civilization for centuries. God is dead, he wrote, and we killed him. How shall we console ourselves? We murderers among murderers. Do you realize the gravity of this? Nietzsche wasn't an arrogant atheist mocking religious people. He was a melancholic prophet announcing a civilizational catastrophe and nobody was paying attention. But it's not just religion. Think about conventional morality, the kind of morality you've been taught since childhood. Be humble. Don't be selfish. Obey. Sacrifice yourself for others. Suppress your desires. Be good. It seems noble, right? Nietzsche looked at this and saw something completely different. He saw a sly morality, a value system created by weak and resentful people to control the strong. Think about it. Who benefits from morality that preaches humility, obedience, and self-sacrifice? The powerful? Of course not. It's the weak, those who cannot win by force. So they invent rules that transform weakness into virtue. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Seriously, the meek ones. Since when? This is a revolt of slaves in morality, according to Nietzsche. A reversal of values where the weak manage to convince everyone that being weak is, in fact, being vertical, and being strong, powerful, assertive. That's sin. That's evil. That's pride. It's brilliant. And it's terrifying. Because none of that is true. It's just a survival strategy. A mask that civilization puts on to avoid falling apart. And here lies Nietzsche's problem. He took off the mask. He looked beneath the surface and saw the mechanisms the gears, the hidden interests behind every sacred truth, and the more he saw, the more unbearable it became. To participatize farce? How can you pretend to believe in something after you've realized it's just a useful construct? How can you go to church after realizing that God is just a human invention to cope with the fear of death? How can you follow moral rules after understanding that they come from nowhere but arbitrary social agreements? You can't, at least not without a brutal dose of cynicism or cognitive schizophrenia. And Nietzsche wasn't cynical. He was intense. He felt everything deeply. He couldn't simply shrug and say, well, it's all an illusion, but I'll keep pretending because it's more comfortable. No, he needed to live according to what he had discovered, and that killed him. There is a concept that Nietzsche mentions in The Birth of Tragedy which is essential here, the Dionysian wisdom. Dionysus, the Greek god of drunkenness, ecstasy, and chaos. He represented a dangerous truth. Life is suffering, absurdity, senseless cruelty. But the Greeks, in their genius, understood something. You can't keep looking at it all the time. You need drunkenness. You need archie, you need illusions that make life bearable. The Greeks created tragedy, those plays where noble heroes were destroyed by forces they could not control precisely for this reason, to look horror in the face, to feel the catharsis, and then to go back for life with its renewed illusions. But Nietzsche was unable to return. He was trapped in the Dionysian stage, in the terrifying ecstasy of seeing the naked truth, without a safety net, without masks, without comforting illusions. And what happens when you stare into the abyss for too long? The abyss stares back. And then he starts whispering things you shouldn't hear. Think about this now. Seriously, how many of your certainties are, in fact, just socially accepted masks? How many times do you defend an opinion not because you truly believe in it, but because it should to believe? How many of your truths are simply fear disguised as conviction? And the most dangerous question of all, what would happen if you took off all those masks at once? Would you still know who you are? Or would you discover that beneath the masks there is nothing, only emptiness, fear, and the terrifying freedom of having to reinvent yourself from scratch? Nietzsche had the courage to take off the masks. And look what happened. There's a quote by Nietzsche that everyone knows, but few people really understand. He understands whoever fights with monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Beautiful on paper, philosophical. You could even get it tattooed. But what does that really mean? What is this abyss? The abyss is unfiltered truth. It is reality without anesthesia. It is the full awareness that there is no meaning, no justice, no redemption only. This raw, cruel, and indifferent existence. And when you look at it long enough, something inside you starts to crack. Nietzsche wasn't writing poetry. He was issuing an autobiographical warning because he looked and the abyss looked back. And what he saw on the other side tore him apart inside. Let's understand how this happened. Nietzsche was not a philosopher who sat comfortably in his armchair, surrounded by admiring students in academic security. No, he was an outcast, an intellectual nomad who wandered through Europe, always ill, always alone, always writing in cheap hotel rooms. He suffered from brutal migraines that left him blind with pain for days. He had chronic digestive problems, severe insomnia. He lived on a meager pension. He published books that nobody read. He sent copies to friends, and intellectuals most didn't even reply. Imagine this. You dedicate your entire life to thinking, to producing revolutionary ideas, to debunking the illusions of an entire civilization. And nobody is paying attention. Worse still, the few people who paid attention to him hated him. Christians hated him for attacking Christianity. German nationalists hated him for despising nationalism. Academics hated him for not playing by the rules of the academic game. Even his close friends, like Richard Wagner, eventually distanced themselves from him because Nietzsche could no longer pretend, could no longer be palatable. And Lou Salome, the woman he fell madly in love with, rejected him brutally. He asked his friend Paul Reed to mediate a marriage proposal. Lou refused. Later, he discovered that Lou and Paul were having an affair. The betrayal was twofold. The abandonment, total. Nietzsche later wrote, "Loneliness is devouring me. and it truly consumed him, because it wasn't just physical loneliness. It was existential loneliness, the feeling of being completely alone with his own discoveries, with no one to share the burden with. But here's the crucial point. Nietzsche didn't go mad, despite off their ideas. He went crazy because of them. His philosophical discoveries were not academic abstractions. They were existential bombs that he had to carry alone every day without respite. Think about what it really means to live with the idea that God is dead. It's not just about stopping going to church. It's about waking up every day knowing there's no divine gaze upon you, no providence guiding you, no cosmic, meaning waiting to be revealed. It's about carrying the weight of that. You need to create all the meaning of your life from scratch, without a manual, without guarantees. And Nietzsche tried to do that. He created the concept of Superman, the creator of values, the one who would be able to live without God and still affirm life with all his might. He preached the amor fati, the love of destiny, the radical acceptance of everything that happens. But he himself failed to become the Übermensch. He created an ideal that was too good even for him. And the more he tried to live up to his own ideals, the more impossible it became. There is something profoundly tragic about this. Nietzsche was like Icarus. He flew too high. He came too close to the sun of truth, and his wings melted. In the final years before the collapse, his writings become increasingly feverish, increasingly grandiose, increasingly dangerous. And behold the man in his latest insightful book. He writes chapters with titles like Why I'm So Wise, Why I'm So Intelligent, and Why I Write Such Good Books. Sounds like megalomania, right? Pure arrogance, but it's not. It's desperation. It's a man shouting into the void. I've seen things no one else has seen. I've understood things no one else understands. Pay attention, please. But the void doesn't answer. And when the emptiness doesn't answer long enough, you start to hear other voices. Voices that come from within. Voices that say increasingly strange things. Do you know that feeling when you think about something so much that you start to lose track of what's real? What happens when an idea becomes so big in your head that it starts to bleed into the physical world? Nietzsche began to have delusions of grandeur, but were they really delusions? Or was it the logical consequence of a man who had truly seen further than everyone else? He believed he was destined to change the world. Andy was right. His ideas truly changed the world, but he didn't live to see it. He believed himself to be beyond good and evil. And in a certain sense, he had truly transcended conventional morality. But no human being can live beyond good and evil without paying a price. The price is humanity itself. Because when you stop believing in the basic categories that organize human evil, right, wrong, meaning purpose, you cease to be able to communicate with other humans. You get trapped in your own dimension, alone, misunderstood, falling apart inside. And then we arrived at that day in Turin, January 3rd, 1889. Nietzsche sees the horse being beaten. And something in it simply breaks. Why the horse? Why that moment? Perhaps because in that animal suffering senselessly, without guilt, without the possibility of redemption, Nietzsche saw a perfect mirror of his own condition. Perhaps because, for the first time in decades, he felt something beyond pure thought, compassion, or perhaps because their mind finally said enough and chose the easiest path. Total collapse. Nietzsche embraced the horse, wept, and fell. And when he stood up, he was no longer Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher. He was just a broken man, lost in a labyrinth he had built himself, from which there was no way out. Now stop and think, how many times have you felt the abyss staring back at you? That moment when you question everything, all in for a second, feels the ground disappear beneath your feet. How many times have you felt that if you think about it anymore, you're going to break? And what did you do? You stopped thinking, you got distracted, you returned to the comfort of your illusions because you're smart. You know when to stop. Nietzsche didn't know, or did he could, and the abyss swallowed him whole. Here is one of the cruelest paradoxes in Nietzsche's history. He spent his entire life suffering physical pain, emotional pain, existential pain, migraines that blinded him, loneliness that devoured him, misunderstanding that isolated him, and above all, the unbearable weight of carrying truths that no one else could see. And then when he finally went mad, he was shippy. This is not irony. This is not a joke. It is a documented historical fact. In the last 11 years of his life, after his collapse in Turin, Nietzsche lived in a state of almost childlike placidity. He sang, he smiled, he played the piano out of tune. He no longer recognized anyone, not even his own work. He lived in his own world, protected, inaccessible. His mother, Franziska, cared for him until she died. Then his sister Elizabeth took over, and that's another tragedy, because Elizabeth altered his manuscripts, distorted his ideas, and basically transformed him into something he never was. But that's another story. The point is, Nietzsche only found peace when he lost his mind. And that raises a frightening question. Was madness the collapse, or was it salvation? Let's think about this calmly. For decades, Nietzsche carried the weight of total lucidity. He saw through everything. He didn't have the luxury of comforting illusions. He couldn't simply believe in something to alleviate existential pain. He was trapped in a brutal clarity that isolated him from everything and everyone. And the more he thought, the heavier he became. Imagine carrying that burden every day. God is dead. There is no meaning. Morality is a lie. Life is suffering without purpose. And yet, I need to affirm all this. I need to create values out you have nothing. I need to be strong when there is no reason to be strong. How long can you put up with this before you beg for an outage? Because that's exactly what madness did to Nietzsche. It shut everything down. The inner voices that never shut up, the thoughts that never stopped. The unbearable pressure of always having to live up to your own ideas. The isolation of being the only one who saw what you saw. Everything disappeared. And in its place came something resembling peace. A foolish peace, of course. An empty peace, but peace nonetheless. Psychology has a term for this. Psychotic escape. When reality becomes utterly unbearable, the mind simply switches off. It creates an alternative reality. Less true, perhaps, but livable. It's a defense mechanism. The last line of defense before total self-destruct. And that is exactly what happened to Nietzsche. His mindset, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to shut everything down. You'll stop being who you are, but at least you'll stop suffering. And you know what's most disturbing? It worked. Nietzsche was no longer suffering. He was no longer trapped in the snare of lucidity. He was no longer alone with his devastating thoughts. He was peace. Of course, it was the peace of a man who no longer existed. The peace of someone who had given up on being human in the fullest sense of the word. But it was peace. And this forces us to confront a brutal philosophical question. Is it worth being lucid if lucidity destroys you? Think about how many people you know who take medication to avoid overthinking: antidepressants, anxiolytics, alcohol, marijuana, obsessive work, endless entertainment, social media. Anything to keep the mind occupied, to prevent thoughts from wandering too far. Because everyone knows deep down that there is a limit beyond which thinking becomes dangerous. Nietzsche crossed that line, and there was no going back. So his mind did what it had to do. It created an emergency exit, an exit with no return, but an exit nonetheless. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. Perhaps Nietzsche's madness was the most intelligent response he could have given. I'm not romanticizing it. I'm not saying that going crazy is good, but think about it. What was the alternative? Suicide. Nietzsche considered it several times, but he had a very complex view of suicide. He saw it as a form of weakness, a surrender. And he couldn't consciously surrender to continue living lucidly. Impossible. He was already at his limit. Every day was torture. He wrote desperate letters. He took massive doses of medication. He isolated himself more and more. Madness was the third option. The option that nature itself offered. A symbolic death without physical death. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, died in Turin in 1889. The remaining body lived until 1900. And there's another layer of cruel irony in all of this. Do you know who took care of Nietzsche during those final 11 years? His mother and sister, two deeply religious women, devout Christians, the same people whose beliefs Nietzsche had spent his entire life attacking. And do you know what they did? They prayed for him. They sang religious hymns around him. They treated him with the Christian compassion that he so despised in his books. And Nietzsche, sitting there, absent, smiling like a child, completely oblivious to the irony. The man who killed God ended his days being cared for by God's servants. If this isn't a Greek tragedy, I don't know what is. But let's get to the central point of this section. Nietzsche's madness was not random. It wasn't just a nervous breakdown or a mental illness that struck him by chance. It was the inevitable result of a lifetime pushing lucidity to its absolute extreme. That was the price he paid for not having masks, not having illusions, not having systems of psychological protection. It was the natural response of an organism that can no longer bear the weight of reality. Madness became my refuge, the only refuge left when all others had already been destroyed by the very pursuit of truth. And now, look at yourself. How many times have you felt like you were that you were going too deep, that you were starting to lose your footing? And what did you do? You stopped. You got distracted. You went back to the masks, to the illusions, to the comforts. You chose sanity over truth. And you were right, because Nietzsche chose truth over sanity. And look what happened. The question that remains is there a middle ground? Is it possible to see the truth without being devoured by it? Or is the choice always binary? Either you live in illusion and remain sane, or you seek the truth and go mad. Nietzsche tried to find this middle ground. He attempted to create the Übermensch, the man who would be strong enough to carry the truth and still affirm life. But he himself couldn't become that man. And if even Nietzsche couldn't manage it, who couldn't do it? So here we are at the end of this journey through the abyss. You saw Nietzsche embrace the horse in Turin and crumble. You saw how poisonous the truth is and how necessary lies are. You saw the abyss staring back. You saw madness as the only possible refuge when lucidity becomes unbearable. And now, the question that matters is not about Nietzsche, it's about you. Because this whole story isn't just about a German philosopher who went mad in the 19th century. It's about the human condition. It's about the price we pay or refuse to pay for the truth. So answer me honestly, do you really want to know? Don't answer quickly. Think about it carefully, because wanting to know the truth sounds beautiful, noble, courageous. Everyone likes to imagine themselves as someone who seeks the truth, who isn't afraid to face reality, who is strong enough to live without illusions. But is that really the case? Let's test it. Are you willing to accept that there is no intrinsic meaning in life? That everything you do may, in the end, mean absolutely nothing? Are you willing to accept that the morality you follow does not come from God, nor from universal reason, but from arbitrary social agreements that could be completely different? Are you willing to accept that the love you feel might just be brain chemistry? That your dreams might just be evolutionary illusions? That you might die without ever having found your purpose, because perhaps there is no purpose at all? Can you carry this? Because Nietzsche couldn't take it anymore, and he was very stronger than you, and stronger than me, and stronger than any of us. Here's the hardest truth to swallow. Most people don't want to know. They think she wants to post profound phrases on social media. She wants to feel intellectual, questioning, free. But when does the truth truly knock on the door? When does the abyss really open? They run. And they run fast. They go back to church. They go back to therapy that says everything will be all right. They go back to self-help books that promise meaning wrapped as a gift. They go back to any comforting narrative that makes the world make sense again. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, because the alternative is Turin. It's collapse. It's madness as a last resort. And nobody, I should have to pay that price. Nietzsche created the concept of the Übermensch precisely to try to solve this problem. The Übermensch would be the one capable of living without God, without illusions, without masks, and still saying yes to life. To affirm existence with all its strength, even knowing that it is absurd, cruel, and meaningless. It would be the human who transcended the human, who created their own values, who danced on the edge of the abyss without falling. But Nietzsche never encountered this being, neither in himself nor in anyone else, because maybe, perhaps, the Übermensch is an impossibility, a contradiction, an ideal too beautiful, to be real. Perhaps no human being is capable of living fully in truth without going insane. Perhaps the very structure of the human mind requires illusions in order to function. If that's the case, then what's left for us? Here's my interpretation, and you may disagree. Wisdom does not lie in seeking the truth at any cost. Wisdom lies in knowing how far you can go without destroying yourself. It's like diving into the ocean. You can go down, you can explore, you can see things that few have seen, but you need to know when to return to the surface to breathe. Nietzsche forgot to come back. Or perhaps Heckle return. Perhaps his mind was incapable of switching off, incapable of stopping thinking, incapable of accepting the comforting illusions that keep the rest of us functioning, and that makes him a martyr, a prophet, a warning. He went all the way to the bottom so you wouldn't have to. He gazed into the abyss until he was devoured by it, so that you might look from afar, learn, and then to go back for his life with his illusions intact, but now knowing that they are illusions, and perhaps that will be enough. Because the truth is this: you don't need to abandon everything. You don't need to become a desperate nihilist. You don't need to live in total lucidity. You can too know that God probably doesn't exist, and yet you still go to church if it makes you feel good. You can to note that morality is a social construct, and yet one follows ethical principles because one chooses to follow them. You can too note that the meaning of life does not come from outside, and yet one can still create their own meaning, even knowing that it is arbitrary. This is not hypocrisy. This is intelligence. It's living with one foot in truth and the other in illusion. It's dancing on the edge of the abyss without falling into it. Being human is about being limited, contradictory, and fragile, and that's okay. You don't need to be the you can just be yourself. But here's the danger: if you've seen too much, if you've questioned too much, if you've sunk too deep, it may be that I can no longer fully recover. The masks may no longer fit as well as they used to. You might look at the people around you living their automatic lives and feel a mixture of envy and contempt. You might be stuck somewhere in between, neither completely deluded nor completely lucid. And this, my friend, is the most dangerous place of all. Because you've seen enough that you can no longer truly believe in illusions. But he didn't see enough to transcend their needs. You are suspended. And if you stay in that state for too long, you'll understand why Nietzsche went mad. So what is the solution? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nietzsche didn't know. He tried to create one, but failed. Perhaps the solution is to accept that there is no definitive solution, that it's a constant negotiation, a precarious balance that you need to reestablish every day. Perhaps that's what it means to be human, to live in the tension between wanting to know and needing not to know, between the search for truth and the need for meaning, between lucidity and madness, and to walk that tightrope every day until the day you fall one way or the other. So the final question, the only one that really matters: do you have the courage to live under this tension? Are you going to choose a side total illusion or total truth then? Accept the consequences. Because if you choose the whole truth, well, you already know what happened to Nietzsche. And if you choose total illusion, you will cease to be yourself. So perhaps the answer is to stay in the middle, in the tension, in the discomfort, knowing without knowing, seeing without fully seeing, living in perpetual doubt. It's not comfortable, but he's human, and perhaps that's the best we can do. Nietzsche embraced the horse and fell. What are you going to hug? Empty whiskey. Fill your glass. The next abyss awaits you. Subscribe to the channel.